So I'm very excited today to have my wonderful guest on Facebook. She goes by Betsy Wurzel. And I met Betsy through my group, Creative Memorial Planning. First I just want to say, we're going to dive into the fact that Betsy has her own group called Kick Alzheimer's Ass Movement. And she also has a podcast called Chatting with Betsy. And we're going to talk about that in a second and get a little more deeply into her mission and her purpose and what she does. But first, I want to, first of all, just welcome you, Betsy, to the Your Creative Chord podcast. So thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you, Jenny, for having me. I am deeply honored.
Right back at you. It's kind of the mutual admiration club here. We're just talking before we started recording of how much I admire what you do and the reach that you have because of your personal experience. So we're going to dive into that so people can really get some value from this. First, I want to say that, again, we met through my group, Creative Memorial Planning Group. It's on Facebook. And what I do as a creative memorial planning coach, Betsy has been one of my incredible supporters in that group and really even promoting what I do in her own Facebook group. And she's a full supporter of the importance of, the aspect that I do of pre-planning your end of life plans. And also what I do differently is that I advocate really against traditional funeral plans. I advocate instead for alternatives to traditional funeral plans that are more planet friendly, pocketbook friendly, and more personalized to comfort surviving loved ones. So this is what I do in my group, and this is how we met. And Betsy actually just featured me a week or so ago on her Chatting with Betsy podcast. We'll drop those links too, so you can find all of that, where we go in a little more depth about what I do. But we had a conversation and it just seemed to want to be endless. So we thought we'd do it again because we think these issues are so important for everyone. The importance of end-of-life planning, and how hard it is for people to talk about this sort of thing, and the importance of having a power of attorney and gaining input from loved ones and other family members, starting those conversations. And as we talked about this, I really shared that, as Betsy was telling me, that people typically don't talk about death or end-of-life planning, unfortunately, because we have a culture to wait until the very last minute or when something occurs. And then we leave it up to our religious leaders and our corporate funeral, representatives. So this is why I do what I do. I wanted to just really be clear, that I help people with this and why age is irrelevant, because I've been through so many tragedies. What I learned about Betsy is that she has an incredible story of being a caregiver to her late husband, Matt. And I want to ask Betsy to tell us a little bit about, her story and why her experience with Matt led her to start a Facebook group called Kick Alzheimer's Ass Movement, and how she got into being a radio show host. Can you tell us a little bit about that story? Because it's so inspiring.
Sure, Jenny. I just want to show Matt's picture. This is my late husband, Matt. See that? Somebody made that for me.
Love that.
And this is the back.
Hold it up real high. So it says, your wings were ready, but my heart was not. Beautiful ornament with his picture on it. Love it.
I might get a little emotional.
That's okay. That's normal.
Yes, Matt was diagnosed at the age of 56 with early onset Alzheimer's.
It's a year younger than I am right now, by the way. Just put that in perspective. Yeah.
Right. I only thought that he had that because his mom had it. His mom's whole side had Alzheimer's. Matt was the first to have it young. I had a fight with the doctors about a diagnosis because they kept telling me, he's too young. Matt was tested by a neuropsychologist, and I didn't know, 11 years ago, what I know now, or I would have ripped her a new one. She told Matt that he was non-compliant and he had a deep psychological problem. So what did I do? I didn't know any better. I yelled at Matt for not cooperating. course, better cooperate. Matt was no angel. I know that. But Matt said, I did cooperate, Betsy. I couldn't remember. When someone comes to you with memory loss, why are you thinking they're not cooperating? This is a story I've heard many times, Jenny. They need better way to diagnose and really believe the person who is telling you, I have a memory loss problem.
That is so important. I want to repeat that. It is so important to listen to the person who has dementia, coming as an onset illness. When they say, I couldn't remember, it's not that I'm not cooperating. I couldn't remember. Good for you for being so persistent. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yes. So where Matt worked, because of the HIPAA laws, they weren't allowed to tell me anything. So I knew just a little bit. Matt's coworker told me just a little bit. So when I sat in, this is the first in their history, I sat in on Matt's disability meeting because they knew he couldn't remember. And Matt had no idea. He had no idea what this meeting was about. And because they sometimes don't realize that they have a problem, or to the extent of their problem. The company doctor, who I don't know if she saw Matt in person or not, thought that he had dementia. She was hoping it would be the type that was reversible due to, vitamin deficiency or thyroid deficiency. So, and she never saw any of his tests. Matt's first MRI showed global shrinkage. It was abnormal. His EEG was abnormal, and it said suggestive of dementia. And yet these doctors here, the thing 11 years ago was, oh, he's too young. So he was treated for depression. That didn't work.
Wow.
Matt taught Sunday school for over 20 years. And he asked me one day, what time was Sunday school? And I said, well, what time is it on your watch, Matt? He goes, I don't know. I said, well, what do you mean you don't know? Are you kidding? Because he was a jokester. I said, he goes, no, I don't know what time it is. I said, so you can't read your watch. You're not able to tell me the time. He said, no, I'm not. I said, well, that's not depression. I went back to the doctor.
First, I got to say, that's pretty astute of you to even pay attention to that. That's remarkable.
Thank you. I'm also a former nurse. So.
Oh, they're a smart cookie.
Yeah. So some people would debate that. So I went back to the doctor and I said, listen, you could be depressed and not feel like doing your job, but you know how to do your job. You know where things are in the house. You know how to tell time. Do not tell me this is depression. You call it what it is and you get him on medication. Because a lot of times the spouse or other family members are in denial. I was not in denial.
No, you were right on top of it because of your nursing background, probably. And you knew him well.
Right. The doctors were in denial. As a caregiver, as a spouse, we know our loved ones better than any medical professional. And that's another thing. These medical professionals need to wake up and start listening to us.
Right.
And we need to cause a revolution. But
truth.
I won't go.
A peaceful revolution.
Revolution. Get the Beatles song playing here. So as a caregiver, I want to tell the audience, you have to follow your gut. Always go by your gut. And if you don't think something is right, get another opinion. Don't be afraid. Don't be intimidated by a doctor. Get in their face.
It's kind of like, I'm going to interject with that because so many people just listen to whatever the doctor says and they shut up and they don't question. But like you said, you have two advantages. You have the knowledge of the person that you love and care for and know very well, and you have your gut instinct. And I think it's very important for people to recognize that doctors are just like any other service in our lives. You shop for the best service. And if you're not getting the quality diagnosis or the quality attention or answers to your questions, you look for another doctor that will give you those. Thank you for bringing that up. That's important. Go ahead.
Yes. So Matt was put on the medications, which, by the way, 11 years ago, and even farther down when my mother-in-law had Alzheimer's, we were told it slows the progression. It does not. And I repeat, it does not slow the progression. It manages symptoms. People get confused. We were misled. There was actually commercials about medicine saying that it slowed the progression. It was taken off of TV. There is no treatment. And Matt knew this. And I'm really grateful that Matt progressed slowly until his last 2 years. And then when it snowballs, it just snowballs. I was not prepared with my mother-in-law. I didn't know anything about Alzheimer's with my mother-in-law. So when Matt, still didn't know a lot. Really, everyone's different. And you really, as a caregiver, you have to educate yourself. And I can't say it enough. Now is the time, and that information highway. There are so many people doing the webinars. There's so many people doing trainings. There's so much information that wasn't available to me. So I envy caregivers now because they have the information.
And now we have you.
And you have to educate yourself. You have to be aware of what to expect. Now, everyone is different, but you have to have the basics of what to expect.
Well, let me stop you there. I'm going to ask some, because I have millions of questions now just from what you just said. So first of all, you said it snowballed. And does that mean that in his later years of dealing with his Alzheimer's, that quickly his dementia escalated more rapidly? And the second question I had was, when you encourage people to educate ourselves about our loved ones that are dealing with some form of dementia, what resources are you saying that we should look for? Could you answer those things? It's snowballed, meaning...
You could look up Teepa Snow. There's the Dementia Spotlight Foundation. There's the Alzheimer's Association. There's also many other support groups.
I noticed in your Kick Alzheimer's Has Movement Facebook group, you have files that have a whole list of these resources that you just mentioned.
Okay, and the Dementia Spotlight Foundation does free webinars. Excellent, really excellent, with Gary Joseph LeBlanc, who is the education director, and he lived it, so he knows what he's talking about.
Those are really good sources.
And so I had to learn to adjust my sails, as they say. Even though I went through an experience with my mother-in-law, I couldn't understand why Matt could not see anything right in front of him. You say, "Where's my water?" It's right in front of you. And I'm, what do you mean you can't see it? And then I watched Teepa Snow, and she talked about their vision. And when she explained it to me, I then understood why Matt couldn't see what was in front of him. So I stopped yelling at him.
Well, what do you mean? Can you explain that? What was happening with his vision, according to Teepa Snow? What changes?
Matt's vision was immediately affected. He was driving in between two lanes. Their perception is off. They have more like a tunnel vision. They can't see like up or low.
Gotcha. That makes sense. Yeah.
I mean, he sat on a pile of clothes one time, and I said, "Matt, why are you sitting on those clothes?" I didn't see them. I said, "What do you mean you didn't see them?" Folks, I'm not a perfect caregiver. I was not a perfect caregiver. There's no such thing as a perfect caregiver.
I second that emotion.
You're gonna, I gotta say this, Jenny. People might try to be the perfect caregiver. We're not perfect human beings. You're gonna lose your patience. You're going to yell. As long as you're not being abusive, it's okay. Show yourself some love and kindness and grace.
That's beautiful.
Because we are operating at a high level of stress. I call it the red alert.
And this is coming from a nurse who has a background in caregiving professionally, and it's still such an incredibly intense, task or way of life to do that. I want to ask too. I know I want to clarify too for the audience that to make this really clear, your husband Matt was going through this at age 56, and he went through this for 11 years. He passed away only 1 year ago, as of January 1, 2021, which is only about a year and 3 weeks ago from now. So this is a remark. I just want to impact people with how remarkable it is that Betsy has lost her life partner and still has, within the past year, become an incredible force for educating people on the signs of dementia and how to care for people, and all these different resources that she's got going on in her podcast. So tell me about which came first, your group on Facebook or your podcast, and how did that kind of materialize out of this?
Well, that's an interesting story, Jenny. Thanks for asking. I told Matt that I was going to tell his story some way, somehow, to the world. And I always wanted to meet someone, or I always wanted someone to see one of my videos. I used to do videos in my car. And lo and behold, Jeannie White, station manager at Passion World Talk Radio Network, saw one of my videos and called me to do an interview. And so I did.
So you're just chit-chatting in your car, making videos, talking about this experience. Where are you putting those videos? Where did they go?
I put it in the different dementia support groups and on my Facebook group.
Beautiful. Okay.
And I talked about, first was raising awareness, and then, caregiving tips. And Jeannie White was on her show. She interviewed me. I said, great, I could die a happy woman. I did it. And Jeannie was starting a show about caregivers and asked me about it weekly. And I said, sure, but I'm not a professional speaker. She said, that's okay. You speak from the heart, and that's what people like. So I invited my friends to come on. And then after a year, June of 2019, Jeannie gave me my own show. I started #Kick Alzheimer's Ass movement 2 years ago, up to February 2019.
We'll make sure all this is in the show notes.
And I started hashtagging Matt's videos and what I was saying, and my own videos, #Kick Alzheimer's Ass movement. And I met Lori Lepore. Her sister was dying at the time. And she said, Betsy, you have to start this a page. You have to start a group. I said, I can't do that, Matt. I don't have time. Even a life coach that I met told me, Betsy, you have to start this. This is your passion. And I'm like, I can't. I'm going to get emotional. We make excuses, right, of why we can't do something. I never saw myself as a leader. Never saw myself as a speaker. Never would I have done this if it wasn't for Matt. So
it's so amazing I just want to say it's amazing to me that you didn't see yourself as a leader, because for people who don't know her yet, if you're not in the #Kick Alzheimer's Ass movement group, or you haven't listened to her podcast, let me just tell you, she's a leader. She's like the Energizer Bunny that just never stops, and has incredible value to give people, and has a huge heart, as you can hear through her, experiences, and the way the way that you're expressing yourself, Betsy. So I'm glad that these people literally forced you to see your incredible capability as a leader for this really critical movement for awareness about how to help not only caregivers, but for the person that has dementia. It's amazing what you've done. So I'm sorry. How did you, so you were doing videos, and then you got invited to be on a caregiver show, for a radio show. And then how did that launch into your show and your group?
After a year, I started the #Kick Alzheimer's Ass movement February of 2019. I had to think, wow, that's 2 years already. Almost. Time goes by. And I was still talking on Jeannie's show, the Connect show.
So you're in the middle of caring for your husband as his disease is progressing and progressing, and you've launched a group and a podcast, and you're running that while caregiving for him. We need a monument in your fashion. Like, we need a monument to Betsy. This is amazing. Go ahead. Sorry.
And I was working, Jenny.
And you were working. Oh, my freaking super women.
I was working outside the home, and so after, was it like in June? Jeannie had said about starting having my own show. And I was like, I can't do that. I don't know how to interview people. And Jeannie said, Betsy, you'll learn, you could do it. And it's really incredible, Jenny, when people see something in you that you don't see in yourself. So I learned to face, as they say, face your fear and do it anyway. And I started my Chatting with Betsy in September of 2019. Yeah.
So it's been about a year. So tell me, this is wonderful, just a wonderful story in general. So if anybody is experiencing any kind of incredible challenge, just think about the incredible amount of encouragement you can bring to people through Betsy's example of that, starting a group or being a proactive activist or whatever about that topic that you're passionate about. Don't let anything hold you back, even your own doubt that you can be a leader. Because like I fully support, the radio show host that invited you, that if you speak from your heart, which you definitely do, Betsy, that's really more important than anything. And that's the thing that does have the most impact on people. So tell us a little bit about, I'm very grateful, and I have a personal reason for being grateful for having met you, which we'll talk about in a second here, with my own experience with someone who has dementia. But tell us a little bit about the purpose of your group and the purpose of your podcast. Are they different? Do they overlap? What's the purpose behind that?
Yeah, they kind of overlap. I created my group because I was in a black hole, and I got myself out of it. And I said, either I'm going to kick Alzheimer's ass or it's going to kick mine. And I'm a fighter. I'm a Jersey girl, and my father's daughter. That was Wurzel. Thank you, Daddy. And my dad taught me to stand my ground, to be a fighter. And I said, I'm not going to let this mofo disease destroy me. I'm not giving it the power. It doesn't deserve it. Yes, Alzheimer's going to take my husband away, and it did. Doesn't have to destroy me. And I'm fighting back. And nobody should ever have to walk this journey alone like I did for many years. So I made it my mission. I did for clip.
It's real. This is real. Yeah.
Nobody should have to walk this journey alone during caregiving or even after, because even after caregiving, folks, you're going to have a whole mess to deal with, a whole mess. And I'm here to help you. My mission, Jenny Lee, is to help people. And my Chatting with Betsy podcast isn't about me. It's about helping people have resources that I wish I knew about. I wish I knew about you. Right. I wish I knew about so many things. You had a great death doula on talking about a list of what to ask hospice. I wish I met her, when I needed it. And this is why I wanted to do resources. Now, it just so happens I'm doing a lot of social awareness, anti-bullying, mental health on my show, but it's all related to caregiving, because who hasn't been bullied? I was bullied. And, there's a major mental health crisis going on in this country, and globally, actually. So I'm doing shows on that.
Yeah.
And the thing is, I'm glad there's a lot of public service announcements about depression now and isolation.
Right.
But where was it for the caregiver who's been abandoned by family and isolated that I talked about for like the past 4 years? Yeah. Nobody cared about us. And I still say us because, well, I'm still a caregiver to my son, Joshua, but that's a different situation.
Yeah.
I will speak up for those who can't and for those who won't.
That's beautiful. Yeah. And thank you for sharing that. And as you can feel from the passion in Betsy's voice, this is, this is something that she has gone through and is going through personally, and just giving voice to that and helping so many others going through it, or who will go through it or have gone through it. It's a huge thing. The caregiver, it's interesting. My sister, Mary, studied as part of her master's degree in public policy. She works here locally at the University of Kentucky, but she studied gerontology as part of her degree. And, she gives me the statistics that, basically the bulk of caregivers are women in their 50s pretty much, and they tend to have it all to deal with, by themselves. And there's such a lot of burnout for caregivers, as you know, is the job is endless when you're caregiving for someone. So I do want to put a little plug in for, just made me think of, on my website, YourCreativeChord.com, and I'll drop the links below here. I have several different blogs and podcasts that I've created it's in my caregiver section, for basically self-care, things that you can do for self-care that involve primarily music and nature. And I've even made some music videos with photos of nature that I've taken just to relieve people, just to bring people, especially now for the pandemic era. Nature and music are scientifically research proven to reduce your stress and to help your wellness. So if you're a caregiver and you can't get outside, these are things that you can kind of look at and get some ideas, or just, peruse through. So I'll drop those for those who are listening who are caregivers and need some self-care. But I wanted to ask too, I want to shift the gears just a little bit, because I think we've made it very clear your background is real, it's personal, it's ongoing. And for people who don't know, I hope you don't mind, I'm sharing, you also just in the past couple of weeks lost your dear brother. And so we just talked about how when you go through grief, when you lose someone and you experience another grief, or even learn about a loss of someone else, you tend to go through those grief stages again, sometimes even deeper. And I know this myself as a creative memorial planning coach. The reason I became that is because of the fact that I was there when people died and no one had a plan. And I had to go through it again and again and again and again to help people. And, through going through these things, it just to me brings out that point that, and kind of highlights what you do as a person of support for caregivers and people dealing with dementia, because unfortunately, aging, sickness, and death are part of that whole cycle that we deal with. So your mission of bringing support and resources to people, and just a human voice that's been there, done that, and is still going through it, is really helpful. I want to shift to a personal thing though, and kind of to kind of paint a picture for people who might be dealing with dementia. I want to get your ideas. For example, my mom's sister is 80, almost 89, I guess now, and she's actually my mom just told me she's the oldest living female relative in my ancestry so far. Knock on wood. I told my mom she has to live to 120. I'm not letting her off the hook before that. But she said that as we're experiencing my aunt's dementia, and I've seen it coming on since I've moved up here from Kentucky about 3 years ago, I could see the things that you were describing about Matt in my aunt, and how she would struggle with a word and could not find the word that she wanted to say. And she'd get so frustrated, with that. And I could see her memory declining. So she just recently has been placed in a facility, which is very heart-wrenching, for everyone, because of COVID. Of course, she's quarantining. She's supposed to be getting a vaccine for the COVID this week. And the rest of us are not to visit, because she has to get acclimated to that facility. And then when we do visit, it's going to be with pandemic restrictions, through a window. So I'm just trying to explain to people how, challenging things are for people who are dealing with someone who has dementia, particularly right now in the middle of the pandemic. But I wanted to, when we do get the clear to go ahead and visit my aunt, wondered some things that I read about how to, some tips for how you can support the dementia person, the person who has dementia, or the person who's going through Alzheimer's, which is a form of dementia. Like, some of the things I learned was, which is really hard for me, is to slow your pace to match the pace of that person. And that means, in my case, breathing a lot instead of speaking, and asking something very simply and being very straightforward and being patient and waiting for that person. Don't try to fill in their answer for them. Do you have any tips for like people like me or my cousins who are caregivers, have been caregivers to my aunt? What are some tips for people who care for those who have dementia that you would recommend?
Sure.
That makes sense.
I have to say, Jenny, thank you for mentioning self-care, because I just want to say, caregivers, it's a matter of life and death. Literally, you have to take care of yourself. It's very important. I find, Jenny, that with Matt, I had to be face to face with him and hold his hand. I don't know if you'd be allowed to do that now with these COVID restrictions when you visit.
Yeah.
And have his attention and talk slowly, which is hard for me. And not use as many words. And
yes.
He would, slowly answer back. Our loved ones feed off of our energy. It took me a long time to realize that. So we're anxious, they're going to be anxious.
This is so important.
We, have to just learn to adapt. They can't adapt to us. If a person is at home, say, and like I couldn't shave Matt and shower him anymore at the same time. It was too much. I had to break it down. Break down your task. Use a red dish, a red bowl. They see red better. They see the food better on a red plate, a red dish. Don't give them a lot of food. Make the food according to their ability to chew and swallow. Near the end, I had to give Matt baby food.
This is really important because before I reiterate some of the other things you just said, I know that it's heartbreaking, for example, for my cousins to see my aunt going down so quickly. And it's got to be, particularly it depends on your personality, but if you've got a personality that wears your heart on your sleeve like you do, you cry out loud, it's really important to, try to have a little bit more, I don't know what's the word, empathy, and extend that to maybe control some of your emotions when you're around that dementia person who has dementia, so that they don't get anxious from your emotionalism, so to speak, which I know is a tall order to ask people, but it's almost like literally they're going back to being a baby in many cases. And my sister described it to me like this yesterday. I wonder if you concur with it, because she said, because we were discussing my aunt, and when my mom and I have a chance to actually see her again face to face, my sister was saying it's kind of like, if you can think of her as like a baby or someone that's coming out of being a baby into a toddler land, you don't speak too much to them. You give them very simple tasks. You're very patient with them. You don't scold them for not getting it. You use small words or few words, or you wait for them to be able to answer, and you cheer them on whenever they do it right. You don't scold them. So I really liked that analogy. What did you think of that?
Well, that's true to a certain extent. Our loved ones are thinking way back. So they may not remember you as an adult. Like your aunt may think of you still as Jenny, the little girl.
Or not even know who I am in some cases. Yeah.
Yeah. And it was interesting because when my mother-in-law was in the nursing home, she knew me for the longest time. The social worker said because she met me as an adult. She was thinking of Matt as a child.
Interesting.
So she didn't recognize Matt as the grown man that he was.
That's interesting, because my mom said this the other day. My aunt was home, and my poor cousins were, they were scrambling to get her into a facility because she was wandering around her home saying, "I want to go home," and she was home. So my mom brought up, as she thought about it, she said she's probably thinking of when we grew up. She wanted to go back home. She was probably thinking of her childhood. Do you think that might be something?
That could be. Matt talked about going home too, and he lived in his childhood home. They're thinking of a place of comfort, a place of security.
Wow, that's helpful.
A place of safety. So don't tell them they're already home. They don't understand that. You could ask them, tell me about your home. What does your home look like? who's
Beautiful.
in your home. Okay, well, I used to tell Matt, okay, I'll take you home, Matt, after breakfast. And then he would forget. Oh, I don't know, it's dark out. I also want to say, Jenny, there's some people that you can't hold their face, so hold their hand, in a gentle way. If they let you.
Right.
Let them see how they
Gently.
are.
So that physical touch somehow grounds them a
Right.
little bit to you.
And some people may respond positive and some may not. It depends on the individual. Matt would, if Matt would hear me cry, he didn't call me Betsy, he'd call me Booby. He would say, don't cry, Booby. It's
Aw.
okay, Booby.
Aw. His heart felt you, and that's the way he could express that. And how do you think, these are beautiful tips. Thank you so much and very useful. I will be sharing that with my family members too. How can we better prepare ourselves or best support somebody with dementia other than these tips? Any other?
Supporting the caregiver, send meals over if that person is at home. I didn't have time to cook. I'll be honest, I did not. Offer to go food shopping with them, offer to sit with the person. Of course, not COVID. I'm thinking before COVID, but during this time of COVID, you could send a meal over, leave it in front of their house. You can give them gift cards if you can afford it. You can just say to the caregiver, I'm here for you.
Love that. Give them a phone call and let them vent a little bit.
You can, for the person who has dementia, you know what, Jenny? We can't fix our loved ones, and that's a hard pill to swallow.
It really is.
I could not fix Matt. The only thing I could do for him or did for him was to be there for him and love him and show him and tell him that he was loved, because they feel very bad about themselves. They really do. And that's what you could do. You just have to, I say, go with the flow of your person. And, you might have to adjust your Thanksgiving or Christmas. You may not be able to hang out your decorations. It may be a safety hazard for your loved one. So you readjust, because you know what, one day they're not going to be there. And you can hang out all the decorations you want then.
Tell me about that. What does that mean? It might be a safety hazard if you hang up like holiday decorations. Explain that.
Sure. Those Santa Clauses or even Halloween, and they make the noise. You go past and make a noise. Mm-hmm. A person with dementia may think that's an actual person, and they get scared. If you have cords like from the Christmas tree, they could trip over them. The flickering of lights may bother them. Even music may bother them. Matt didn't like certain people's voices. I have to use
well, and I have turn that voice off. So what about, and that brings up a question, like I know a lot of people have the TV on all the time, and when people are visiting, they've got their phones beeping or buzzing or ringing, going off when they're there with that person. Does it matter? And should these noises be kind of limited, or do you think noises bother the dementia person, the person with Alzheimer's or dementia?
It depends on the person, and actually even at that moment.
I see.
Matt, for some reason, did not like this this guy, one of the major New York stations. He didn't like his voice. I couldn't have him on. Certain songs would bother Matt. Matt liked to watch TV, but then he didn't understand it. And then he thought that people were in the house.
You mean by watching TV that he thought they were actually there?
Yeah. He thought that people in the radio were in the house.
So how did you respond to that when he thought that? I
told him that, they were in the TV, but I said, okay. And if they were bothering him, I go, okay, Matt, I'll kick the people out.
Brilliant. And so that brings up a question too. I've heard this before, that when someone that's suffering from dementia has an issue with something, you never argue with them. You just agree and offer a different solution or change the subject even. Would that be accurate?
When Matt, and I had prepared Josh for hallucinations. when Matt would hallucinate, and everyone's hallucinations are different, and say there's men in the house, and he was very concerned about my safety. He would say, "Don't go over there. There's men over there." I go, "Okay, Matt. I will get rid of the men," and I would curse them out and tell them to leave. You had to really
as only you could do.
Yeah.
Is that a common part of a person with dementia having hallucinations? Is that typical? Does it come in the later stages or off and on?
It depends. Usually to the middle, to the later, but it depends on the individual. Also, delusions, like they might think a tree outside and they can't see well. They might mistake that for a monster or a person.
So you just say, "Okay, I see what you're saying. I'm going to get rid of it."
Right.
Whew, it's gone.
And change the subject.
Change the subject. Okay.
Yeah. The first time Matt was hallucinating, I was at the store and Josh calls me up very upset. "Daddy's yelling, there's men in the house. What do I do?" So I said, "Okay, Josh, just remain calm and tell Dad you're going to get rid of the men." I said, "Let me put Daddy on the phone." I go, what's up, Matt? "There's men in the house. They're hitting me." I said, "Oh, I'm sorry about that. That's terrible." I said, "Josh will get rid of the men. They will not bother you anymore." "Are you sure?" "Yes, I'm sure." And
wow.
I told Josh, keep telling that to Daddy till I could get home.
Beautiful. It's almost like dealing with literally, I guess it is a kind of mental illness. You're dealing with calming someone, taking away their fear, and giving them a different thing to focus on that's more positive.
Right. You don't argue with someone who's having a hallucination. They believe that it's real. And before you assume it's a hallucination, know their background if possible. Maybe they had a traumatic event in their life. Maybe they were in the war. Maybe they were assaulted. These things come back. And to me, it's a form of mental torture because they're reliving it and they can't escape it.
So how, like if someone's had a bad experience and they're kind of fixating on that, you just come in and say, "Tell me about it." And then you say, "I'm going to get rid of it for good. And let's do this instead." That's pretty much how you would do that.
Right. Something like that.
This is so invaluable for people that are dealing. Thank you for this. I can tell just from hearing the way that you've approached things, what fortune Matt had that it was you that was his caregiver, because I'm going to say, as a caregiver myself, fairly new to it, my mom is pretty decent in health right now. The caregiver job is not for sissies to start with, any kind of caregiving job is, but to have to deal with dementia with someone that, is that close to you for 24/7 is a tremendously difficult job. And just the love and the spirit that you had to learn about it so that you could support your late husband is very evident. And I think you can really, breathe a sigh of satisfaction that he got the absolute best care of anyone. No one knew that, no one knows when they're going to get dementia, but if you've got dementia, it's great to have somebody like Betsy on your side of the team. And I wanted to ask on that note, a couple of questions maybe for us to wrap up here, but I'm going to ask them and let you kind of go off on it for me. I wanted to ask, what meaning has your experience with caring for Matt and enduring his loss taught you? And what's something you'd like others to know about your experience with caring for both your husband and your son, your adult son, that you feel might be helpful to others facing similar challenges? So kind of twofold. What meaning has it given you, and what would you like others to know about this kind of situation?
We're stronger than what we think we are. I did not know how I was going to handle Matt's death, watching him die. I have to say that, I have faith, and I believe God gives you grace at the time that you need it. And really, I have to claim my faith really helped me a lot. And it made me a better person. And the situation, Jenny, is you can use this experience to teach your children empathy and compassion, you can become a better person or a bitter person. How are you going to choose that? Are you going to let this mofo disease destroy you? I wouldn't give it the power. I still won't give it the power, even as I'm grieving. Are you going to be sad and cry? Yeah, I still do. And I will always love and miss Matt. Get emotional again.
Yeah.
My son has special needs, and he was great with Matt. He was
Wow.
so good with Matt.
How beautiful.
And they say out of the mouth of babes.
Yeah.
Someone in church would say to this guy who was an idiot, actually, said to Josh, well, I want to call your dad, but I don't know what to say. And Josh said, well, it's not rocket science, Bill. You call up, you say, hey, Matt, this is Brother Bill. How are you? Not that hard, Bill.
Beautiful.
This is coming from someone with special needs.
I love that. Because it's all about the heart. It's not about formality. It's about the heart and just being with that person naturally. Thank you for, didn't mean to interrupt you, but that's beautiful.
So, Josh knows and understands more about Alzheimer's than so-called intelligent people. Someone even had the nerve to tell Josh, your father would be better off dead.
Ooh, that was horrible.
Matt was like halfway into his dementia progress. What a terrible thing to say to somebody.
Let me just say what not to do.
Yeah.
God, that's horrible. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Well, I am, really moved by your experience and your expertise and your, I think you had a mission, first of all, just having come from a caregiver nursing background, but even on top of that, to be challenged with both helping your adult son, caregiving for him, as well as going through this with your husband, to come out of that and continue to be so powerful a voice in helping others learn about, what dementia does, what it is, how you can support it. This is huge. So, I just want to say how much I appreciate what you do, and I will make sure our audience can find every possible way to learn more about you, your podcast, your group, all these resources. Your story is really encouraging to so many people, me even personally, because of what my aunt is going through and how I know that dramatically impacts my mom, who is very close to her. They've been like tight, as sisters for so long. So this, I hope, if nothing else, that just being here for your Creative Chord podcast kind of helps you remember how important and how valued your voice is and your mission is. And I know my listeners are going to get a lot out of this. So I just wanted to thank you so much for being here, Betsy. And is there anything you wanted to say to wrap up for everybody?
Yes. Thank you very much, Jenny Lee. I love what you do. People jump into Jenny's group, jump onto her creative memorial planning, learn about it, see if it's for you. I can't even impress how important this is to get what you want at your service, memorial service, whatever you want to call it. I knew Matt's wishes. I honored his wishes. My brother just died. I felt really bad that, my mom didn't have anyone else speak. I'm glad the Masons were there. I think he would have loved to have had Jimi Hendrix play in the background or Beach Boys. I played it after everybody left. I went back and played music for my brother, but so important to say what you want at your service, whether you want to call it funeral service or whatever.
Right.
We don't like to talk about death and dying, but it's a fact of life. And we need to discuss it. So let's discuss it.
She's preaching for me right now. That's exactly it.
Thank you for what you do. That's important.
I love you. And right back, seriously, I know it sounds like a broken record, but this really is the Mutual Admiration Club, because what you do is powerful for people. And I'm so excited to have this, posted for people so they can learn more about what so many people go through and they don't know all the support is there for caregivers, for people dealing with Alzheimer's, for people dealing with dementia. This is huge and so comforting for so many people. So I want to thank you, and we're going to wrap up for today's show. And thank you so much for joining. And I'm so happy to have had Betsy Wurzel here from #Kick Alzheimer's Ass Movement Facebook group and her wonderful podcast, Chatting with Betsy. I'll drop those links so everybody knows how to find that. Thank you so much, Betsy.
Welcome. Thank you.